The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for NCEA's webinar today. I am Thomas Pigg with NCEA, and I'm happy to host this webinar for you. Before we begin, please know that your microphones and connections have been muted. If you have questions during today's presentation, please send your questions through the question box that appears in your GoToWebinar panel. To ask a question, use your mouse to click into the blank box area and type your question using the keyboard and then click send. The webinar presentation will last about 1 hour. You can post your questions at any time throughout the presentation to be added to the queue. Immediately following the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a brief survey about your webinar experience. I thank you in advance for providing us with this valuable feedback. For those of you who are attending this webinar live, you will find a copy of the presentation materials and a certificate of attendance in the handout section of your GoToWebinar panel. You may download them at any time. You will receive an email tomorrow with instructions on accessing the recording. Before we begin, let us start with a prayer. We pray this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And let us pray as Jesus taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. At this time, I would like to introduce our presenter for today, Sister Dill McDonald from here at NCEA. She is the Director of Public Affairs. Sister Dill, at this point, you can go ahead and begin your presentation.
Thank you very much. Hello, and thank all of you for joining us today. With the reauthorization of the No Child Left Behind, now known as the Every Student Succeeds Act, we were able to persuade Congress that there were some significant changes that need to be made so that our students and our teachers would have greater equity in the law as they were supposed to have had from the original enactment of this law. So what we'd like to do today is to explore some of those changes. The new law goes into effect next September, the new school year. But it's during this school year, 2016-17, that you begin the consultation process for the kinds of benefits and services you and your students will be receiving next year. So it's really important to keep that in mind. Hopefully by now you have the new school year underway in terms of your Title I services, you know what Title II services you will receive, etc. So what we're doing today is what you will be talking with your LEAs about in the late fall, early winter when you start the consultation process. So that being said, what we'll look at today is from NCLB to ESSA. Goodbye NCLB, hello ESSA. And so what we'll look at is what has stayed the same, then what are the new changes under the law, and how is the consultation process to be structured so you get those benefits for your students and teachers, and then what are some of the programs that would be included, and then some additional questions and answers you may have at the end. If you have questions or ask for clarification as I go along, I'll keep my eye on the box and try to answer them as we go, or take questions at the end. So what has remained the same? The two basic principles on which our participation in any of the federal education programs resides are the child benefit theory and that of public trusteeship. So students and teachers receive the services and benefits directly. There's no aid to the school, there's no money to the school. Benefits and services are paid for by the district. And the other important piece for the child benefit theory is that the services must address the needs of the private school students and their teachers. Under public trusteeship, the LEA, the local public school district, remains in control of the funds, and they expend them on our behalf, and then the services that we receive must be secular, neutral, and non-ideological. What has also remained the same, and this is where we've succeeded in getting greater equity, is that the expenditures, the money spent for services for our students and teachers, should be equal to that of what is spent for public school students and teachers who are similarly situated to our students and teachers. The services have to be supplemental. That means that they have to be for enrichment, for extra, beyond what a school is required to do, which is why you don't get money from the federal government for textbooks, for instance, or for teacher salaries, whether in public school or private school. And then consultation between public and private school officials must be timely and meaningful and occur before any decisions are made about how our students and teachers will participate in the programs. What has also remained the same is that, with the LEA controlling the funds and they maintain the ownership of any materials, equipment, or property that's purchased to service our students. Those goods and services are only used for those who are eligible for the services, and they remain the property of the district. So if they want their materials back after this program ends, you have to be able to provide that for them. For Title I services, the eligibility for that is based on whether students are low income and are residing and participating Title I public school attendance areas, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into Title I. For all other programs in ESSA and for special ed as well, all other programs, our participation is based on where the Catholic school is located. We work with the district in which the school is located. The significant changes, the new things that we're going to see in ESSA come under 4 categories: funding, consultation, the introduction now of a new ombudsman to be a neutral arbiter between the school and the LEA, and then delivery of services, different mechanisms that will provide wider choice for our students. So the most important change is that the proportionate share, the amount of money that's supposed to be set aside for private school students, has to now be calculated from the total amount that the district receives before the district can set aside any funds for public school uses. That is a big improvement. So no longer will they take money off the top for special services for public school students and then decide to share the rest with the private school students. The split comes at the top, all of the money. If the private school is 5% of the students in the district, then 5% is set aside for servicing private school students and their teachers. The other important piece is that the LEA must now disclose how the equitable share was determined. For the last go-around at NCLB, they were required to tell you how much you got, which was a big fight, we understand, for many people. But not only do they have to tell you now how much you're getting, but how they came to that calculation, so that you can see, what the total was and what your percentage would be, and see if it is an equitable share. The state education agency now will also provide an announcement to the private school official who does the consultation of what their share should be. So the LEA applies to the state education agency for its funding, and it says these are the number of private school students, these are the number of public school students, and that's how they calculate their share. So the LEA knows what the percentage should be and is now required to tell you. So if there's a discrepancy between what the LEA tells you and what the SEA tells you, there's a process for rectifying that. The proportionate share can be determined every year or every 2 years, and that's part of what you talk about in consultation. And then this new piece is that the funds must be obligated for the year in which they were allocated, that the district has to plan with you in the consultation process how the money will be spent during the year. for the federal government, the year runs from October to the following September. So that what we're trying to avoid here is that in May the district calls and says, oh, by the way, we just remembered that there's another $10,000 and you have to spend it in the next week. That's not an appropriate use of the money because you can't plan accordingly. So now they have to tell you early enough on and have to plan with you that all of the funds can be used in the year in which they're supposed to be used and limit any carryovers. Another big gain for the private school community is the appointment of an ombudsman. This is, an impartial arbiter who is appointed to monitor the requirements of monitor and enforce the requirements of ESSA. So the ombudsman will be appointed by the state. There is no direction to the state from the federal government about that position, whether it's a new position, whether it's someone who's in another job and gets this tacked on to his or her work. And so in order to make this a meaningful position, it's really important that the private school community, through its state working groups or state CAPE or some other mechanism, a Catholic conference, tries to work with the state education agency to get someone appointed to that job who is neutral, who has some understanding of private school operations and how private school students and teachers participate in ways that are different from how the public school does. And so that ombudsman there, as we say, is to monitor and enforce the requirements of the law for private school students. And the ombudsman is also to receive the results of our consultation attempts, and from there we'll have to monitor and enforce if something is not going as it's supposed to. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go into the consultation process. This, we are hopeful, will be a very positive step for our participation in these programs, that this person will have a good working relationship with the private school community, and that we will try our best as a private school community to keep the ombudsman informed without overwhelming. And I think, that's depending on the size of your district. The ombudsman doesn't have to be involved in everything. The involvement is in the monitoring and enforcing those requirements that are not being implemented the way the law says they should be. The LEA can provide services directly, which they've always been doing in one way or another, but there's more specific language in the law that says that the LEA can provide it through the separate government agency, either through its own teachers or some other configuration, through a consortium or some other entity, or a third-party contractor. The only requirement is that whoever provides the services has to be independent of the private or religious school or organization, so that the diocese can't be the person who provides the services, for instance. Then a new focus here is that the SEA, the State Education Agency, can be the provider of the services directly or through a contract, which would probably be a third-party contractor of some sort. If the LEA has not met its requirements for providing equitable services, then you as a private school official can ask the SEA to be the provider of the services. So a lot depends on your working relationship with the district, but that is an option if the district is not meeting its requirements. The existing consultation process is still left in place, and the focus in consultation has always been what are the needs of the students and how can these services, whether it's direct services to the student or if it is professional development for the teachers who work with these students, the focus is on the student. And so the important thing is, what are the students' needs? How are you going to identify those needs? and then what services will be provided to meet those needs, and then how and where those services will be delivered, and how you're going to assess those services, because the outcome is supposed to be some academic gains, and so how are you going to know that? And that's where you talk about all of this in the consultation services before any decisions are made. The district can't tell you that this is what you're going to get and meet its obligations for consultation. The new improved consultation requirements are really very important and need to be strategically utilized. The law now says the goal of consultation is to reach agreement. To reach agreement. It's not to simply tell the private school, this is the way it's going to be, this is what it is. They now have to deal with you at the LEA by telling you, as I said earlier, how the proportionate share of funds was determined, to engage in conversation about new services that at one time some were available but not utilized greatly, one-to-one tutoring, counseling, mentoring, because for some students who have academic problems, they also have some other problems that would benefit from counseling before the academic activity would be beneficial. So those are additional services that have to be discussed. Use of a third-party provider. I mean, they're very clear in the language that if you choose to have a third-party provider, they have to engage in consultation with you about that, and if they choose not to listen to you, they have to give you reasons why in writing, and that can become a basis for an appeal if it is not a reasonable reason. Tell you when the services will, the approximate time of day when the services will be provided, and then to discuss whether or not to consolidate funds within the school so that you might move some of your other titles into Title I, or combine some of the other titles with each other, or combine funds with other schools in your district. So if the law now has a application of a consultation agreement. Prior to ESSA, the Title I consultation was the one that had to have an agreement signed that, yes, consultation has taken place. Now all of the programs have to have a consultation affirmation signed, so that if the required consultation has taken place and you are pleased, you sign the affirmation. And the required consultation is all of those things on the 2 slides before that we talked about that have to be discussed in order to meet the needs of the students. If all of the consultation hasn't been done appropriately, then the consultation form now has an additional section that allows the private school official to indicate that they don't think timely and meaningful consultation has taken place, and this is where you would list what parts of the consultation process they have not followed through on. The private school officials can file a complaint with the SEA that if the district didn't consider its wishes, its views, didn't engage in consultation, or did not make decisions that treats the school fairly, equitably or fairly. So those are the grounds on which you can file a complaint with the state education agency. And frequently when you let the district know that you are going to file a formal complaint, they may want to have a consultation with you and revisit what they have decided or not decided. So let the district know that you will be filing a formal complaint, and hopefully it may be resolved at that level. But if you do file with the state education agency, they have 45 days to respond to you. So if within the 45 days you don't receive a response, or it's not a satisfactory response, then within 30 days of receiving that denial of your request, then you can appeal to the Secretary of Education at the U.S. Department of Education. And that complaint at that has to be resolved at that level within 90 days. Now 90 days seems like a lot. However, in the past it was an indeterminate, and sometimes it went on for more than a year before you had a response. So we're starting to tighten up the complaint process. The titles that will be used for private school will include private school participation, are what we'll look at next. So this Title I, the basic Title I program, which is pretty much the way we have experienced it, with hopefully better consultation that will include more students, will include more delivery mechanisms, and certainly will include more funding, since the set-asides will not be taken off before the proportionate share is delivered. Title I, say the education of migratory children. Title II, Part A, which is the professional development, preparing, training, and recruiting teachers and school leaders. The part there that's applicable to us would be the training, not recruiting, preparing and training, not recruiting. Title III, language instruction for English learners. Part 4 is a new title. Title IV is a new title. They call it 21st Century Schools, and it has several parts. And what Title IV has done is taken some of the programs, for those of you who've been around a while, some of the programs you knew years ago that have not been funded. So in Title IV, you're going to see, as I go through, some of those other programs that are now coming back in a new form. Title 4B is the 21st Century Learning Community Centers, which are pretty similar to what they had been. Title 4F is supporting high ability learners. This is a revamping of the Javits Gifted and Talented. The next two sections on this slide are probably the most important pieces of information that you need. Section 1117 is a part in the law, the actual text of the law, that talks about the participation of students enrolled in private schools. And Title VIII, the uniform provisions, which looks at what Title IX used to look at in the old bill, which says these are the programs, this is what's covered, this is the language that has to be applied for private school participation. Both Section 1117 and Title VIII, the text of those documents are posted on the NCEA website. All of the public policy, the federal programs materials on the NCEA website are under the lead section of the website, the first one on the left when you go to the opening page, and then you can scroll down and you see. The Section 1117 and Title VIII are documents that you should familiarize yourselves with. It's more detailed, very specific language of what I'm trying to do here this afternoon. But that document would be something to take with you to the consultation process, so that when there's some question about whether this is really true, no, we don't have to tell you how we got to the formula. Yes, you do. It says here in Section 11C, and you show them the number. They should have those documents, but they might not. And so it would be important for you to have those documents, familiarize yourself with them, and bring them with you to the consultation. Just a word about knowing what type of program you're looking to consult on, whether it's a formula program or a discretionary program. Formula grants are set in the law. The law says that this is how Title I operates, who's eligible, how the funding is apportioned, what the funding levels can be at a maximum, and so on. The federal government sends money to the state sends it to the districts. In the discretionary grants, they're awarded on a competitive basis. So it could be to an SEA, it could be to an LEA, it could be to a community organizing group or some other. The law says what that process would be for the grant. And the U.S. Department of Education may handle that itself or through some other process that's described in the law. What's important when you're doing consultation is to know what's a formula program and what's a discretionary program. And as I go through the ones here, I'll mention which is which. The important thing is to let the district know that you are interested in participating in discretionary programs as well as the formula programs. And at the start of the school year, you should receive a letter from the district asking whether you want to participate in the programs and which programs you might want to participate in. If you haven't received that in the next week or two, I would suggest you contact the LEA and say, we are interested in participating in, and name all of the programs, and hopefully all of the programs would have some relevance for you and you would want to participate in. And you let them know that you want to participate in the programs and that you want to set up a consultation schedule before everybody's schedule gets crowded. And since consultation has to be timely and meaningful, it has to give you notice so that you can participate. To tell you that there's a meeting tomorrow is not timely consultation. And so if the district doesn't contact you, be proactive and contact the district and ask for consultation schedule to be set. Look at Part A of Title I, which, as I said, is pretty much the same program as it had been, providing the educational supplemental educational services for private school students who are eligible. And the whole goal of Title I is these supplemental academic programs that will help students to achieve. And something we have to keep in mind before the district people is that the academic needs, the academic standards, the curriculum in our schools are different from those of students in public schools, so that our student needs may not be the same as the student needs. Our standards may not be the same as the standards, and certainly our curriculum is usually not the same as that of the students in their district. And the programs have to be designed to meet the students in our school so that they have a chance to attain a high-quality education and to reach proficiency on the standards and on the standards that your school sets. So in order to be eligible, a student must reside in a participating public school Title I attendance area and be failing or most at risk of failing to meet standards. So this is where the district sets Title I attendance areas, and they base that on the poverty level of their school district. And they serve the highest poverty schools first. In order to be a student selected to be at risk of failing, that's determined on multiple criteria. It's not simply this is what they got on a reading test or a math test. It has to be a combination of materials and evidences that students are not achieving, that they're at risk of failing in your school, not failing in a public school, but failing in your school. And so you provide a list of students, you rank them in order of students that you think need this kind of additional support. For private schools, our programs are set apart from the regular school program. They don't take place within the actual school curriculum. They take students out of the classroom and service them in some other part of the building. They may take place during the school day as a pull-out program, or before or after school, or even summer school programs. These are things that you negotiate in the consultation process. What would be the most productive way to use the funding to support students so that their achievement is supported by these programs? These programs are, again, to benefit the students, their needs, not the convenience of the district nor the convenience of the school or the school principal. How do we meet the needs of the students who would benefit if these programs are administered properly? Under certain circumstances, private school teachers may be employed by the district, but they have to meet district requirements, and that would certainly, and have to be outside of school time, and while they're being a Title I teacher, they are employed by the district. They're not your employee at that time. They're employed by the district and they're paid by the district. The collection of poverty data, which determines the amount of funding, all right? Poor students generate the funding for Title I. At-risk students are those who get the services. So that their same measures of poverty that we have used in the past are the same under ESSA as they were under NCLB. So that you can use the actual survey, you can use extrapolation or proportionality. The important piece is that you consult with the LEA. While they have the final say, they have to give you reasons in writing if you say that this is the measure that you think would be the most beneficial for your school counts, etc. So that you try to use a measure that will give you the best return. So that if you know surveys are not always returned by families, etc., you may want to use one of the other measures. A new measure that has been introduced is the Community Eligibility Provision, CEP they call it, which is a direct certification method. So if 40% or more of the students, if you have a school count of poverty of 40% or more, and your school serves the federal lunch programs or the breakfast program or the milk program, instead of doing all of the surveys, you can get someone certified to explore the public roles to see the number of kids who are in poverty programs like TANF, SNAP, subsidized housing, etc. For most of our schools, this is a difficult hurdle to get over, that you have to have the meal program and you have to have someone who can be able to do the mining of these data. We're looking at ways to try to be able to plug into that in another way if a district has some kind of survey data that it utilizes. This is problematic for our schools, because most do not have the funds to hire someone to go out and try to gather these data. And then the benefit, though, is that if you get the data from the public poverty rolls, then you can multiply the number of kids. So if 48 kids are found, then you multiply that by 1.6 and you get a higher count. The beginning of this program came through the nutrition programs, and the goal was to get more kids free lunch. So that if you do this program, in addition to having the funding to hire someone to do the public matching for you, then you also have to give everyone in the school free lunch. So for schools that do direct certification, everyone gets lunch free, whether they need it or not, economically wise. And so you have to have enough students that the 1.6 will pay for the lunch. That's a program in itself, and that's not a problem if a school is able to do it. Our concern is that if some schools, and if a lot of public schools can do this when they say, well, now apply it to Title I, then our portion of the funding is somewhat less equitable, because we can't multiply by 1.6 if we don't do the multiplier. It's a complicated process. Not many of our schools can use it, so that some of the other methods are probably what you will be using, but you need to know this if they start to talk to you about CEP. Part C is the education of migratory children. This is a program that we really haven't used much in our schools. We've always been able to use this, and this is for children who are on the move, usually seasonal workers. And the benefits here would be for help in dealing with students who are moving a lot and may not have a full academic curriculum or keep repeating the same thing as they go from place to place. So the hope with this is that they would be able to have some equitabilization of curriculum through materials and training for teachers that would be available. As I say, I have not met any of our Catholic schools that have used this program in the past, but if you have children who are seasonal worker children and families of seasonal workers, this would be something to explore. Part 2, Title II, Part A, is the professional development program. And what they're looking for in these teacher quality state grants for professional development is activities that are part of an overall professional development program that is addressing what skills the teachers need to help students get a well-rounded, challenging education. What's important is they're not looking at scattershot, one-shot programs. We're looking at something that's intensive, that's job-embedded, that focuses on the long term. The big gain here in Title IIA Teacher Quality State Grant is that the funding for this program for professional development for private school students is based on the total allocation. Many of you know that in working through this program in the past 8-10 years, you were not included in the whole program. That the public school could use some of the money for teacher recruitment, for class size reduction, for teacher benefits, teacher pay for merit, etc. That portion of the money was separate from the professional development, so that if the district decided out of all of its professional development money it was only going to use 5% or 10% for professional development and the rest of the money would go for class size reduction and whatever, then the private school only shared in the money they had set aside for professional development. Now the whole program, whatever the district gets for Title IIA, the proportionate share for private schools is of that whole allocation. Then if they want to use it for other things like class size reduction and for teacher recruitment, they do that out of their share, and our share is used primarily for professional development. So this is a huge gain. There will be a lot more funding for our professional development needs, but they need to be some kind of sustained program that's supplemental to what you might have been doing, for small professional development activities in your school. But this is now looking at integrating it through the whole curriculum and focusing on conferences and workshops that would play into what your overall goals are. So again, the programs that you're sending the teachers to participate in, or you as a teacher are going to participate in, have to be focused on how will my going to this workshop, going to this presentation, gaining these skills help the student to achieve. And so what we're looking at, the activities here would be, improving teacher knowledge in core academic subjects. And now we're looking at integrating technology. We're looking at STEM programs, new kinds of instructional strategies, and addressing, even improving student behavior so that the classroom environment is conducive to learning. One of the big things that's part of all of this is how do you use data to improve student achievement, and so there are plenty of opportunities for teachers to gain knowledge in using data that would be, formative and summative data. How does that work toward what you do in the classroom instruction? So They're also now moving some of the other programs into this so that part of professional development can go into English language like Title III would have, and even parts of Title I or Gifted and Talented. So it's there are many uses, but the goal is to improve student outcomes, and so a wise use of the funds is to integrate it across the curriculum and in whatever particular academic focus you're using that year in the school. Part 3, English language acquisition learners. Okay, we refer now to, students with limited English proficiency, etc., now called ELS, English learners. And so there are opportunities here for schools, particularly those that have large concentrations of students who are English learners, whether they're coming from Europe, South America, Asia. These are opportunities available. There are opportunities available to help teachers, help students who have to learn English as their second language, and so the bill calls for equitable participation of our students, and the professional development that can be part of this title or part of Title II would be for any teachers who deal with students, not just your EL teachers, specific teachers who may be second language teachers, but any teachers who deal with ELS kids. And the school administrators are eligible for these kinds of programs and professional development, or the students, the materials and things to help the students actually engage in the program. Title IIIA is a discretionary program, so you have to be in a district that applies for that grant. If the district does not apply, then you can't apply on your own. So the other piece that's important is that there is an assessment. Just saying, well, they come from a home where the parents don't speak English isn't enough. That there is a process that they go through. There is an assessment, and part of the grant may be to help students, to help teachers learn how to do this assessment in the private school, or how to identify these students using what the LEA may come in to administer. This is a program we're starting to pick up in different parts of the country. It's important that if you do have students who are in need of these services and teachers who have to have some assistance in dealing with English learners, it's important that you let the district know that you want to participate in this program. Title IV now, the 21st Century Schools, has two parts that are very specifically identified in the uniform provisions as including us. But then in Title IV, Part F, there is language in the bill that says that private school students should be included where possible, and in most instances it should be possible to include us. Part A is student support and academic enrichment in grants, and academic enrichment grants. And basically what they're looking at is what they call now a well-rounded education. So this is where several of the other programs that we used to know in the past are coming in. We're looking at not just math and reading and the emphasis on test taking, but on a holistic education. Music, art, language, and so on. Looking at improving the conditions, safe schools, safe and drug-free schools are part of this, and then all of the technology integration, so that we will see parts of what used to be Title IID with the technology and the availability to obtain the computer hardware and software usage, and then in Title IV, the various safe and drug-free school programs, peer and mentoring, counseling, etc., will come in here. So the focus in Title IV is funds being used for digital, access to personalized digital experiences. So technology, both hardware and software, And this would be in addition to people who will participate in the E-rate program where they're building the infrastructure. E-rate provides the infrastructure if you're looking to create, wireless internet in all of the classrooms. But the actual hardware to support that and software to support those learning experiences would come from this title. Drug and violence prevention, mental health services, counselors, nursing services, etc. Whatever would create a healthy and safe school environment. So we're, again, whatever the Title 4A funding allocation is, the proportionate share for private schools is based on the number of students in the private school. STEM accelerated learning, dual enrollment courses, arts, music, foreign language. So we're looking here not only at direct programs for the students, but also for professional development for the teachers. So there's Title II professional development money, there's Title IV, which can all, can be combined together for some really very effective learnings opportunities for our teachers and principals and other educational personnel, which at this point looks as if, say, guidance counselors could be part of some of Title IV because you're providing mental health services, etc. Title 4B, the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, this is the program that's been in effect through NCLB. And this is where it's a direct grant from the federal government. These are huge grants where a consortium, an agency, a consortium, a district will contract with partners, community partners. That's where you work with libraries, YMCAs, museums, etc., and create these after-school learning programs that have, not only tutoring, but various kinds of enforcement, academic and cultural, and work with the students and their families, school time, after school time, summer school. Private schools are eligible to become a direct provider. Very few do because we get into a lot of entanglement with this in terms of receiving financial funds. This is the one program in which you could take money, but then you become a recipient of federal funds and all of the attachments that brings. For most of our schools, the participation, it consists of their students attending programs in some of the public schools in the district, if the district has this program. If the district is applying for the grant, then if you want your students to participate, you let the district know you want to be part of that. You have to be part of the consultation process. How will this program benefit your students as well as their students in the public school? And one of the ways may be if they're looking to set up multiple sites, that one of your schools becomes a site, that the district uses one of your schools to have these enrichment programs. So this is part of the consultation process. Would your students participate more effectively if if the program were in one of your schools? If that's not feasible, that they're only doing one school, one site, at least your students are eligible to attend the programs. Part F, as I say, does not show up specifically in covered programs for private school participation, but there is a section in the law that says we can participate. So the important piece is that these are programs to identify and support students who are gifted and talented. That most of the focus through NCLB and some of these programs is always on the at-risk student. And Congress has been asking, well, what about those students who are high achievers, who could use more help, who could be challenged to even greater heights? So under Title IV, these programs are looking at best practices for identifying and serving gifted and talented students in a variety of ways. Summer programs, mentoring programs, etc. The law says, and this is Section 4644G, says that in making grants and entering into contracts, the Secretary, that's the Secretary of Education, shall ensure where appropriate provision made for the equitable participation of students and teachers in private secondary, elementary and secondary schools. So this is, again, if you have students who are gifted and talented, you think that there are more students, if you knew how to properly challenge and identify them, this would be a program that you should consider asking for participation, in the consultation process. So that's a brief overview. We will be doing additional webinars on particular pieces of this. This is what we know right now about the program. At this stage of the Department of Education has not put out the very specific guidance for private school participation. Having worked on the reauthorization of the law, this is what we know the law says and what it means. How it's going to be implemented and translated to the LEA has not been made very clear yet, but the Department of Education says that by the time the consultation process would begin and before the people at the Department of Ed go out of office as the new administration comes in the fall, in January, that they will have these guidance documents available for the districts and for private school people who are engaged in the consultation. So I urge you to pay attention to the NCEA website, occasionally check that out to see if additional guidance has come out or other directives. We will be posting anything new on the NCEA website under the lead section, Public Policy, and we will be putting things in the NCEA talk as that arises, and most likely some things in Momentum. So that's a brief overview of where we're going in this new era of ESSA, and we certainly encourage you to have all of your principals and teachers know what the law is and how they can maximize benefits. Your students' parents are the taxpayers that are providing all of this funding for these programs, and so our students are certainly entitled to the benefits, and some of our fiduciary responsibility is making sure that the students who are eligible get what they're entitled to. So I don't see any questions here. If anyone has questions, start typing and I will see that. Otherwise, I will pause for a second. I don't see anything coming in. The first section, the very first page of these handouts would have my email address. If you have questions later on you want to send, please do so and I will respond. Otherwise, I think I'll turn it back to Thomas. There's nothing coming in, so if you have last-minute things to finish up.
All right, thank you, Sister Dale. Appreciate that. We will just hold up for one moment. As a reminder, if you do want to send us a question, there is a questions box. You can type your question in there and hit send, and it will come over to us, and we can answer it here live right now. As a little bit of a reminder, we actually have the presentation that Sister Dale just did, the slides for that. If you look on your panel, you should see something called handouts, and you should be able to download the slides from there. So you can have those available. And of course, we will have this entire presentation available for you to watch in the future, and that will be coming out in email. All right, and I'm not seeing any questions come in right now, so at this time, I guess we will go ahead and conclude today's webinar.
Thank you all for participating.
Yes, thank you all. We would like to invite you to visit our website at ncea.org to see further upcoming webinars that are coming in the future. We have a few each week, so please go ahead and visit there. And again, thank you for spending your time with us today, and thank you, Sister Dale, for all the information that you have shared with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you all.
Have
Good
a
night.
great evening.